This show does not provide medical advice. If you're having a medical emergency, please call 911. Anything you hear here should be discussed with your primary health care provider. Hello, and welcome to Everyone Dies, the radio show produced by Passionate World Talk Radio, whose goal it is to educate, enlighten, and entertain. I'm Marianne Matzo, and for the next 30 minutes, I am your host. Today we're going to be talking about hospice care. And I received a message from Noelle, whose mom went into, or started to receive hospice care early in July. Mom's 71 years old, has squamous cell skin cancer, and had some metastasis, some movement of the cancer, and has really not been doing very well since about, really kind of got more sick since about the middle of July. So Noelle and I are going to be talking about what it is or what it's like to have a parent in hospice. So Noelle, welcome to our show.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here. It's
great. So Mom started kind of receiving care at the beginning of July, and you were beginning to tell me that about the middle of July. Did you have a family party, or what happened?
Yeah, we had a little family party for my niece. She just turned 10 years old, and that was on a Saturday. We all gathered. We had some cake for her, and then on Sunday, Mom went to bed and just didn't, I guess she went to bed on Saturday and didn't wake up on Sunday or very little, and she was out of contact. And then my sister went over there about 5 p.m. and found her in bed. So at that point, she didn't really leave bed after that.
Oh, I see. And that had to be pretty scary to, Mom not answering the phone, the dog didn't go out, what's going on.
Yeah, it was pretty shocking, and but I knew immediately. I was like, this is it. Go.
Mm-hmm. So, Noelle, you have one sister who's about 10 minutes away. Your mom's sister is helping to take care of your mom, and you're about an hour away. And you were starting to tell me that you'd spent, was it a week or a couple weeks where you went to Mom's house and was her hospice caregiver?
Yeah, that's correct. So right after Mom had kind of gone to bed and not gotten up, my sister was there the first night, but she has 3 children, so it was kind of a surprise to everybody. But I do not have children. I gathered myself together, and I went up there for 3 nights, and then we were alternating 3 nights on, 3 nights off. But that quickly diminished down to 2 nights, down to 1 day, because it was just so overwhelming and so taxing, and the lack of sleep and the physical demands of it all, it just became too much. So, but for 2 weeks, it was pretty grueling, I have to say.
So did you have any preconceived notions or prior experience with a hospice in terms of what you were expecting was going to happen?
I didn't really know. I understood that there would be medications provided for her pain, and I understood they would provide things like a hospital bed and other facilities, but I didn't really have a strong understanding that she was going to become so incapacitated and that she was going to need really around-the-clock care, except for when she's sleeping. But even then, the fact that she would attempt to get out of her bed and fall on the floor, it really did become a 24/7 kind of job. So that was all very shocking and not really clear to me from the outset.
So the first night or the first 3 days that you spent with her, can you tell us what those 3 days were like? What did you do in those 3 days?
Well, she was still very cognizant at that point, and she was crying a lot. She was in pain. She was combative and kind of nasty. She was and then she was sleeping a lot, but, she was just very uncooperative and just would get up out of her bed and go into the bathroom. And I think maybe, the second or third night was when I was awakened out of my sleep and I heard help, and I found her on the floor of the bathroom, half naked, frankly. And that was very, very shocking. And, she was just so uncooperative. But at that point, we realized there was some sort of dementia that was there, or the drugs were just keeping her from really making rational decisions at that point.
Mm-hmm. And so you weren't getting much sleep. Did you have to bathe Mom, or was she able to get up and go to the bathroom? What kinds of other tasks did you find yourself doing?
Well, that was a very big point, the bathing part. So the nurse from the hospice care came the first time, gave her meds, came back the second time and said, do you need somebody, speaking to my mother now, do you need somebody to help you to wash? And she said, absolutely not. I wash myself every single day, which was not true. And my sister was in the room. My sister said, what are you talking about? At this point, it's probably been 10 days since you've washed yourself. And my mother got really, really angry at her. But unfortunately, what that meant was, like, every day after that, she would try to get up. Like, the worst point for me was I think it was a Tuesday. It's probably in the second week. She got up. I was in the other room. So by the time I got over to her bedroom, she was in the bathroom. And I heard her moving around. And she kind of opened the door for a second. She said, I'm going to take a shower. I said, and I started pleading with her. I was like, you can't take a shower. You're going to kill yourself. What are you doing? And she was like, ah. And she, like, shut the door on me. And at that point, I, like, sat down on the floor in front of the bathroom. I'll be honest with you, I grabbed a couple of towels because I thought I was going to have to mop up some blood. I was just beside myself, and I called my cousin who was a nurse, and I said, I don't know what I'm doing. I am not equipped for this. What do I do? And she kind of talked me through it. There was nothing I could do. And she said, well, she's dying. I said, yeah, she's dying. She said, so if she hurts herself. I said, but I don't want her to be in pain. And she said, I know. And it was just a horrible, horrible catch-22 situation. Because if I went in there, it was going to be a major fight. And, she's a very spunky lady, and she probably would get violent. On the other hand, if she went down and she hurt herself, then what do? I call 911. She goes into a hospital. So I just didn't know which way to turn. So at that point, I basically just sat there and I prayed and I said, okay, whatever's going to happen, Susanna's making her choices now. If she's going to die in a hospital because she broke something, I guess that's the way it's going to have to go. I said, but if there's something I'm supposed to do, God, I need you to tell me right now. So I just sat there and I waited. And about 30 seconds later, she opened the door and she said, I got to lay down. And I helped her back to bed.
That must have been so frustrating and scary and maddening all at once.
Well, even talking about it, I can feel like the panic in my heart. I think I have some post-traumatic stress disorder around this, actually. So,
you probably do. You probably do.
After that, I never slept while I was there watching over her. I just wouldn't sleep. We set up a camera so we could keep an eye on her, and I just never slept. I would fall asleep for 30 seconds, and I would wake up with a jolt, and I would see that she hadn't moved. So that was how the rest of my time watching over her was, just never sleeping.
And that's not sustainable. We get to a point where, when we're young, we can go a few nights without sleeping, but at a certain point, you can't do that anymore and function in any way. When I was taking care of my mom in hospice, she had a double bed, a twin bed, I don't remember, in her room, and I would just lay on the outside of the bed. So she wasn't getting anywhere because the wall was on one side and I was on the other. And I would catnap that way. And you start to lose, all the niceness of your soul after a while when you haven't slept and you're so tired. The relationship with your mom beforehand, was she always a real independent kind of woman?
Yeah, hard of hearing and very tough and very willful. She overcame all the limitations of her deafness her entire life. So she's a real stubborn, spunky lady. And I admire her so much now in these last days, more than I ever have in my entire life, because I can see just how tough she really is. I mean, I knew it all along, but this really just drives it all home. So I'm in some ways, I'm grateful for this experience, because I can see, I really get a deep appreciation for who she really is,
Mhm. And so if she's always been really independent, and now you're in a position of, do you let her go in the bathroom, or do you, giving her a bath or feeding her, doing those kinds of things that, moms did for us, but you never had to do for her, that's also a very poignant experience too, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, I mean, it was, I didn't do a lot of it, because by the time, after a couple of weeks, we realized we needed a caregiver. And even though it seemed like there was no money for it, we found the money, let's put it that way, because it was either that or lose your mind. Because goodness knows, as tough as she is, how long she will live, I don't know. So having said that, yeah, there were a couple of occasions when I needed to do some of that personal care for her, and I just tried to be as compassionate as I possibly could. And, that kind of thing doesn't make me squeamish, and I really felt like I was just trying to help her. But I felt so bad for her, because she was such an elegant lady. She really took pride in her appearance her entire life, so I knew just how deeply this must hurt her on some level,
Right. Right. And, as a mom, you think, too, well, you don't want your kids to have to do things like that. But we can all get at some point where there's help that we need. And so it's sort of poignant for us as daughters, and it's humbling, if you're a mom, to allow people to help you, especially if it is your daughter. It's a real interesting dynamic. So, go ahead.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I did observe that she seemed more open to receiving that kind of care from her older sister, more open than she was, say, to me. Where I think at one point my sister and I had tried to. We were like, let us clean you off and that kind of thing. And she was like, I'm still your mother, which I just kind of laughed. My sister was a little bit more taken aback by it. I saw the look on her face. But, either way, I think when her older sister was around, she still fought, but she was just a little bit slightly more submissive.
Well, and if it's an older sister, then I'm sure that older sister throughout life, pulled the older sister card when she needed to, or when, your mom was little,
right.
did do some kind of caregiving things. And I think what your mom said is really important for our listeners to think about, where she said, I'm still your mother. One of the things as a gerontologist that makes me crazy is when people say, oh, old people just, they get to be like children. She was my mother, but now, I have to take care of her like she's my child. No. No matter what's going on with your parent, they are still your parent, and they are not your child. And how you may talk with your child or handle issues or problems with your child, that's one thing. But your mom or your dad, they are your parent, and they have that respect and that deferring to them, more choices. I think people can get themselves into a very difficult situation if they start to try to treat their parents like they're a child. Do you have any thoughts about that?
I have to agree with you there, absolutely, because all along I have been stressing because I believe it so strongly, I've been stressing to everybody. My belief is all along, everybody, I'll speak about Suzanne, my mother, she has made her choices. Every single choice that she made has led her to this moment, and who am I to interfere with that? I told my sister early on, this is the way I'm approaching it. I am supporting the choices that she has made. She wanted to go on hospice care because she didn't want to feel the pain at the end. I support that. It's whether I believe in it or not is irrelevant. I'm only here to support. And even Mom, half out of her mind, wants to take a shower. That was a choice I had to make. Do I bang down the door and drag her out of there, because I know she's probably going to hurt herself? Some people might say, Noelle, yeah, dang right you should have. But at the same time, I said there's a grace of God that occurs, in my opinion, that if that's the way that she's meant to die, then that's the way she would die. But I didn't want to steal that dignity from her, It was a very difficult situation, but I just erred on the side of surrendering to, whatever forces exist around us that, bring us to those points.
And, I always, one of my things I always say is people have the right to make a bad decision. Nobody stops me from the bad decisions I make. And just because you're older doesn't mean that, we have the right to go in and say, that's a bad decision, you're not doing it. And it's like, well, that's a bad decision, but, I hope you can deal with the consequences of it. There's nothing wrong with saying, this is not a good decision, Mom. And I'm glad that she didn't put you guys through that again, because chances are she was pretty scared inside that bathroom, as scared as you were outside of it.
Well, interestingly, what actually, it's coming back to me now. I think I blocked a lot of it out, but I do recall saying to her, if you do that again and you fall, I'm calling 911 and you are going to a hospital because I am not going to be able to help you. And she was like, I'm not going to a hospital. If I go to a hospital, I'm going to die there. And I said, well, then don't do that because that's where you're going to end up. I promise you. And she was pissed. And she folded her arms and wouldn't look at me because I knew I had her at that point. I said, go ahead, make your choice. And there you go. That's your consequence that you don't want. So think about it. So while she still had any kind of faculty to think things through, it did stop her from doing anything too crazy or stupid.
Right. So now, one of the other things that we were chatting about before was that you were saying that you were surprised by the medications that are there and available to you and the responsibilities that you and your sister have in terms of giving those medications. What's that about? Well,
currently she's on a fentanyl patch for pain, and we have the ability to give her morphine. Now, after speaking to my cousin who's a nurse, she said, those are very small doses of morphine that they've given you. But having said that, I feel like having these drugs delivered to our house and put into our refrigerator, I'm just shocked by it that we're expected to administer these pain medications. I mean, not expected. Nobody's putting a gun to our head, but you know what I mean, that's our responsibility. That's what we signed up for. And, well, that's really what my mother signed up for when she wanted hospice. Like, if I had said to my mother, hey, who's going to be giving you the morphine? It's going to be me and Ashley. I wonder what she would have said. She probably would have still said, you guys will do all right. She probably would have said, but really, that just wasn't clear. I thought somebody was going to come to the house and give her these medications, I guess, you know?
Yeah, I worked as a hospice nurse, and I remember one time going into a house, and they said, well, you put your stuff down here, and we'll show you where your room is. And I said, I'm not staying here. And they said, well, you're the hospice nurse, right? I said, yes. And, we're going to get you all set up. We'll get you admitted. We'll get your meds, all organized. But I don't stay here. And they were shocked that I was not staying there. And they were like, well, who's going to take care of him? I remember going into one house with a very elderly man and his very elderly wife, and he was sick, and he was a big guy, and she was a little woman. And I looked at the situation, and I thought, there's no way. I mean, she couldn't even reach him up in the bed. There's no way she can take care of him. So I had to spend a lot of time with her. What about the kids? Is there well, there was this one son, but she really just didn't want to bother him. I'm like, I was very uncomfortable leaving her alone because I thought there's no way she can handle this, let alone, okay, so this medicine you give every 4 hours, this medicine you give if this happens, or, whatever. It's like, hospice requires a lot from the family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And,
also,
it's a great program, and most people want to be able to die in their own home, but you got to be prepared for what it is you're signing up for. Some medicines we give in the rectum, so I can remember, telling family, okay, well, this is where this is going to go, and they're like, excuse me, what?
Right.
And some families will refuse to even give it. So like, well, you can give it when you show up, but I'm not putting my finger in my dad's ass.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, well, I can understand that. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, it sounds like you were a very compassionate, and you did your job well. And with no disrespect to anybody or anything that I've encountered, I feel like we were extremely ill prepared and given very little guidance. It was just like the drugs showed up. They sent over a commode at one point. There was no like, well, here's how you help your mother get used to this, or here's some tips for encouraging her to use the commode, or anything like that. There was nothing. We were so ill-equipped. Still am.
Well, so for you and for our listeners, here's what I would say is that you need, so in most hospices, there's the RN who comes out as needed, and then there's the aide who'll come out to help with bathing or light housekeeping. There's the social work that can come out to help with the grieving and that kind of thing. But when the next time the nurse comes out, either your sister or you or both, say, when are you going to be here? We need to talk, because we don't know. I mean, I guess maybe at this point your mom's not is your mom transferring to the commode to go to the bathroom still?
No, not at this point. She's in diapers now. Yeah.
Okay. But even, or for our listeners, if you don't know how to transfer somebody to a commode, when that nurse is out there doing that admission, that's the time to say, I don't know how to do that. Because there are many times I would show people, okay, here's how you do that. Here's how you hold your body so that you don't hurt your back, so that you don't drop them on the floor. So, nothing bad in addition to whatever else is going on happens. But, you think, well, surely they're going to tell me this stuff before they leave, and they may not.
Yeah.
And so you guys have to ask. Go ahead.
Yeah. Even picking her up off the floor, which I did on, more occasions than I would have liked. My lower back is really kind of messed up now. It would have been great to just have like a small primer on, here's the best way to do it. And I figured it out after a while. Get behind her, lift like a deadlift with your legs. Don't use your lower back, as if you were doing weightlifting, and hook her under her arms. If somebody had just told me that from the outset, I could have saved myself a little bit of pain.
Yeah. Yeah. And so the medications, did you have any questions, or do you have any questions about the medicines you guys are giving her?
Well, at this point, my sister and the caregiver are taking care of that part of things, but the whole morphine thing was very shocking. We were giving her Dilaudid pills for a while, and then one day the nurse showed up and said, she seems to be in a lot more pain than she's letting on. She really should be on the morphine. And we said, oh, okay. Well, we didn't know when the right moment to make that switch is, because she was having trouble swallowing the pills, but she was the Dilaudid wasn't touching the pain after a while. Mm-hmm. So we weren't really given a strong understanding of how the tolerance level goes up over time too for the medications, right? She would sleep the first day or two or three, and then she'd be back, and it seemed like, is she in pain? How can you tell when she's in pain? All of those questions still remain unanswered, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. So the issue with pain is always a big question, because what's one of the reasons why people choose hospice is that they don't want to be in pain. They don't want their families to see them in pain. And so looking at restlessness, sometimes it's even just kind of movements in the hands or restlessness of the legs might be an indicator. Moaning is a good indicator. And you're right about the tolerance. I'm impressed that you use the word tolerance when it comes to the morphine, is that your body figures out how to metabolize that. And so once it figures it out, or the opioid receptor, that part of the body that says, oh, there's an opioid, I'm going to take that and use it and manage the pain with it. The opioid receptor gets kind of comfortable at whatever dose you're using. So if you're using 2 milligrams every 4 hours, eventually 2 milligrams isn't going to do anything. And going up to 3 milligrams, the opioid receptor says, that's just like 2. That's not going to make me do anything else. So the only way to wake up the opioid receptor is for the dose to be doubled. So if the person's on 2, you'll see that the hospice nurse might say, oh, sounds like she's getting tolerant, double the dose. And you say to yourself, holy schmoly, I'm going to double this? Well, what if they're on 8 milligrams? Well, like I said, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 is the same as 8. The opioid receptor is not going to respond. You've got to double it to kind of goose the receptor to say, oh, okay, I'll work now. And so that's how morphine is. And so don't freak out if the nurse says, okay, we need to double that. Because that's how that drug works.
Right.
And a lot of people are very afraid to give the morphine. They're afraid, well, what if I give the morphine and then, an hour later they die? Did they die because I gave the morphine? No. In your mom's case, she died because she has squamous cell skin cancer.
Right.
It's not the morphine. It's the cancer that's going to kill her, or the result of the cancer. The morphine, there's, with everything, there's going to be a last kiss. There's going to be, a last hug. There's going to be a last dose of morphine. And just like none of those other things caused Mom to die, well, the last dose of morphine isn't going to be the cause of her death either. Does that make sense?
Yes, that does make sense. It's a good thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, because I'll tell you, even nurses have, like, oh, they died right after I did that. It was because of what I did. And we have to remind ourselves, no, it happened because of whatever the disease process that they've been dealing with, not because of an intervention that we've offered to help them feel better.
Right. Right.
Do you have any final thoughts or questions that you think listeners need to know about what it is to take care of a mom in hospice?
No, I think for me it just would have been really good to know from the outset that once she started to take the heavy meds that her facility was going to diminish pretty rapidly. I mean, I don't know that anybody could have known that was going to occur, but it would have been really nice if I was a little bit more prepared with that knowledge that she could fall off the cliff really quickly in terms of not getting out of bed anymore. So that is what it is.
It's sad to watch a parent go through it, but it's also a tremendous gift that both you and her have in terms of being able to have that time and care for her. I found when I was taking care of my mom in hospice, she had had a major stroke, so she, every now and then, something would come out that made sense, but mostly she was mute, and but I would still keep a running conversation going. I got to tell her all kinds of things that I've wanted her to know that prior to her dying. I mean, I was in my late 50s, mid 50s, I guess, but I had never told her. I feared judgment or all kinds of things, and I just chattered and told her just everything, and it was very healing for me. I don't know what was going on in her head, but it was very healing for me to just tell her stuff. And so, you can take that as a gift and lay with her, and I would every morning wash her feet. Was one of the things, because she always had liked to have her feet rubbed when she was younger, and so I would wash her feet. And when my daughter, who was, I don't know, was she in maybe 7th grade or 6th grade, came out for Christmas break, because Mom was still alive at that point, she'd say, "Okay, Mom," to me, "come on, we got to go give Grandma her bath." And it's like, girl, she ain't going anywhere. Give me a minute,
Yeah.
But she was very into taking care of, doing those kinds of things. And so those are gifts that you can give, that pleasure, that care to your mom.
Yeah. Yeah, and there were those moments of grace for sure when I was in the caregiving role. She had her moments of clarity. Probably the last one was when she kind of looked at me and her voice was all very low and barely there, but she kind of looked at me and said, "Thank you for everything." And I said, "I love you." She said, "I love you." And at that point I said, okay, for me this is, relatively complete. I'm going to hold on to that. Yeah. Well, I'll hold on to that and see where it goes, right?
Well, and not everybody gets that. That is a gift in itself, Noelle, in terms of to have that connection and to be able to say that, and for her, you heard her, and for you to know you get what I'm saying, that you could hear each other. That's really wonderful.
Yes.
Well, I will keep you in my thoughts and prayers, and I hope you'll stay in touch by email. And I really appreciate you sharing your story with our listeners.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate talking about it. It's very healing to talk about it, so thank you.
Yeah. Well, and to our listeners, thank you for spending time with me during our show, Everyone Dies. You can read our blogs and listen to our other podcasts at everyonedies.org. That's EVERY, 1, dies.org. Thank you to our producer, Jeannie White, and our CEO, Lillian Caldwell. We produce a new show every Wednesday to answer questions related to life-threatening illness, dying, and death. Remember, you can listen to Passionate World Talk Radio on Spreaker and our shows wherever you listen to podcasts. If you have a topic that you'd like to discuss on our show, please email Marianne at everyonedies.org. That's MARIANNE at EVERY, 1, DIES.org. I hope that you live your best life every day, and remember, every day is a gift. Thank you for listening.